This is one of the earliest looks at a God of War prototype I have. Sony Santa Monica were experimenting with ways to use the environment to convey interesting themes and motivate the player to play more and unravel the story behind the levels. In a pitch to Sony higher-ups just 4 weeks into development, the director of God of War, Cory Barlog, wanted to emphasize that this would not be a God of War 4, but a completely reinvented version of the game. Today, I answer the question of how the studio shook up the entire gaming industry with a completely fresh and bold new take on God of War. I will show you how God of War went from this to this. Let's start our journey at the very beginning. In 2013, Cory Barlog, the game director of God of War, put together a pitch for this new vision for God of War. He outlined 3 core pillars to the new game with his pitch. These pillars were father and son, combat, and exploration. Sony Santa Monica were tasked with creating solid foundations for these pillars and having them complement each other. The pitch was that while the story of God of War 3 ended with the entire world being destroyed, Kratos would be reborn in some sense into a different mythological setting. But how do you give Kratos a fresh start? In the original games, he was always angry, so how do you transform him into someone with complex emotions? The answer that Cory came up with is that you don't. That angry god is still inside of him, but over the years, Kratos learned to keep those emotions in bay for the sake of his son and training him to grow into a good person. Which brings us the first pillar of development. How do you have Atreus in battles as an AI in a way where he would support the player and would not hinder the player in any way? They started experimenting with having his abilities be in supportive roles like rooting enemies using a nearby tree or summoning crows. But the developers learned quickly that players would be going around the battlefield trying to figure out ways to use Atreus' abilities in a more stealth-like way, and this is the complete opposite of what they wanted. So, they experimented. What if Atreus was a bit more involved in combat? They changed his behavior to switch either offensive or defensive depending on the combat scenario. In this first clip, you can see that Atreus is being more offensive in the background. He's shooting enemies and keeping them at bay while Kratos deals with the enemy in front of him. This was a good way to make Atreus useful without impacting the player's combat, but also having the players see that Atreus is not being completely useless. And in the next clip, we can see him be more defensive. Kratos gets hit and combat is temporarily stopped, but Atreus leaps over Kratos and stuns the enemy a bit, allowing the player to get right back where they left off. Eventually, the developers wanted to make Atreus even more useful, so they would have him go into battles and divide out the enemies a bit to make it easier for the player to focus on smaller groups of enemies. This notion of having a supportive character off screen was really helpful, so they expanded his abilities to allow the player to have Atreus shoot arrows at an enemy with the press of a button even when he was not visible. The combat team would continue to work on the relationship between Atreus and combat, bolstering 2 of the 3 pillars I shared earlier: combat and the father and son relationship. The level designers also had to reinvent the way the game would actually play when the player wasn't in combat. Some of the core pillars for exploration would be large, wide linear spaces, bonus puzzles, optional fights, and also by creating design that would ultimately lead the player back into the game's main hub. There were also many more items on the checklist that would also be required for a great level design, including, of course, having cinematics have no cuts. In fact, originally, when this closer camera shot was being demoed by Cory Barlog, reviewers would be confused and would want the camera to be pulled back because they were so used to games having the camera not so close. Thank God that this wasn't changed, since it allows us, the player, to have a more intimate relationship with Kratos. Now, let's take a closer look at this incredibly early prototype footage. What you're seeing here is a stark contrast to the polished final product, of course, yet it reveals the foundational ideas that the team was experimenting with. Notice the rudimentary environment, the basic character models, and the simple combat interactions. They were exploring how Atreus could use the environment, specifically using these shock arrows to trigger explosions. This concept, though rough, was pivotal. It demonstrated the potential for environmental puzzles and combat scenarios that would later become a hallmark of the game. This raw, unrefined look into the game's infancy highlights the iterative process and the dedication to finding the right balance between player agency and environmental interaction. Creating scenarios where the player would naturally want to explore the levels was critical to the development of God of War. The team knew that they had to strike a balance. Exploration had to feel rewarding without overwhelming the player or distracting from the central narrative. To accomplish this, they carefully structured the world using a wide linear approach, where levels were expansive and filled with hidden paths, yet still guided players along a cohesive journey. One key element in fostering this sense of exploration was the Lake of Nine, the game's central hub. Unlike previous God of War titles where levels were strictly linear, the team designed this space to be a living, evolving area that subtly encouraged players to return. As Kratos and Atreus progressed in their journey, the water levels in the lake would recede, revealing new islands, hidden treasures, and side quests. This design choice gave players a natural reason to revisit previous locations without making backtracking feel tedious. The hub, acting as a central spoke, allowed for a structured yet flexible approach where progression felt both organic and rewarding. Players would complete a level, gain a new ability, and naturally return to the Lake of Nine, now equipped to explore previously inaccessible areas. This loop of exploration and reward ensured that players felt a sense of agency over their journey rather than being led by rigid quest markers. And to further enrich the sense of discovery, the developers integrated environmental storytelling into the world's design. Hidden chambers, ancient ruins, and remnants of past civilizations weren't just empty backdrops. They told pieces of Midgard's history, deepening the world's lore and making exploration feel meaningful. Even the dialogue between characters played a role, offering insights, hints, and legends that provided context to newly uncovered locations, making the world feel alive and interconnected.
But how did Frey end up a hermit in the woods?
Oh, that was a singular piece of cruelty, even for Odin. As if the marriage wasn't punishment enough. Freya was better to him than he deserved. She stuck it out through all manner of indignity, all in the name of maintaining peace and safety for her people. But Odin's madness, his tyranny, his corruption of her magics, it became more than she could stomach, and at long last she broke it off.
And by weaving all these elements together, structured yet open-ended level design, evolving environments, rewarding backtracking, and rich storytelling, God of War transformed exploration into an integral and immersive part of the player's experience. And by 2015, within just a bit over a year of development, Sony Santa Monica would create a demo of these pillars working in unison. This greenlight demo contained aspects of everything I have shown you thus far, showcasing their bold new vision of what a reinvented God of War would look like. And despite it being a prototype, the demo successfully convinced Sony to greenlight full development, proving that God of War could be reimagined while preserving the essence of what made the franchise special. While the final game would evolve from this early vision, this demo established the core pillars: intimate storytelling, methodical combat, and a deep father and son bond that would define Kratos' new era. In this early prototype, the most striking change was the over-the-shoulder camera perspective, a drastic departure from the fixed cinematic angles of previous games. Another key pillar of this demo was the introduction of Atreus, Kratos' son, marking a bold new direction for storytelling and gameplay. This demo showcased their evolving relationship with Atreus, assisting in combat by shooting arrows, reacting dynamically to Kratos' actions, and this demonstrated the father-son dynamic that would serve as the heart of the game, replacing the lone, rage-fueled journey of past titles with a more nuanced, character-driven narrative. This demo would also showcase the new Norse setting to the Sony executives, featuring a cold, rugged landscape filled with dense forests, towering mountains, and mysterious ruins, a stark contrast to the sun-drenched, grandiose architecture of Greek mythology. This setting symbolized Kratos' fresh start and self-imposed exile, reinforcing the themes of rebirth, restraint, and redemption that define the game. And finally, another groundbreaking feature was of course the seamless no-cut camera technique, which ensured that the entire experience unfolded in a single, uninterrupted shot. This ambitious cinematic approach strengthened immersion and emphasized the emotional weight of Kratos' journey, eliminating traditional cuts between gameplay and cutscenes. Oh, and of course, this version of the demo featured a bald version of Atreus, which looks a bit uncanny if you ask me. This demo would also have a more slim and younger version of Kratos, but despite the early models, you can tell what Sony Santa Monica were going for with this short slice of gameplay. I think at this point, they knew that they had a masterpiece on their hands. By the time God of War was revealed at E3 2016, the game had evolved significantly from the 2015 greenlight demo. The most notable change was the visual upgrade, with richer environments, improved lighting, and more refined character models, bringing the Norse world to life in stunning detail. Kratos' animations were more fluid, making combat feel heavier and more deliberate, reinforcing the weight of the Leviathan axe in every swing. Atreus' AI was also enhanced, making him more responsive and a useful companion in both exploration and combat. The seamless no-cut camera technique was also refined, ensuring every moment felt immersive and cinematic. The 2016 reveal was more than just a graphical showcase. It was a statement of intent, proving that this God of War was not a sequel, but a complete reinvention. And with that, we've seen how God of War transformed from an ambitious pitch into a genre-defining masterpiece. From its earliest prototypes to the E3 2016 reveal, every iteration brought refinements in combat, world design, and storytelling, shaping the bold new vision that would go on to redefine the franchise. What started as an experiment in reinventing Kratos and his world became one of the most critically acclaimed and beloved games of all time. God of War wasn't just a sequel, it was a rebirth, proving that sometimes the best way forward is to start anew. I hope you guys enjoyed this deep dive into the development of God of War. If you'd like to see more content like this, please drop a sub, and if there's anything I missed or if you want any other games to be covered next, feel free to drop a comment down below. Thank you.